I would love to pass this off to our student moderator team, Erica, Khadijah, Nick, and Jessica, for quick introductions of themselves. So Erica, why don't you get us started?
Once again, thank you for being here today. My name is Erica, and I'm a senior studying biology, computer science, and data science at Northwestern. And I'll be moderating the conversation today with Khadijah, Nick, and Jessica. Would y'all like to introduce yourselves really quickly?
Hi, I'm Khadijah. I'm a freshman studying neuroscience at Northwestern, and I will be the assistant moderator with Erica, Nick, and Jessica.
Hey everyone, I'm Nick. I'm a senior also studying biology and data science, and I'll be moderating the chat today.
Hello, my name is Jessica. I'm a sophomore studying neuroscience, and I will be one of the chat moderators today.
Cool, so we'll be hearing from our alumni for about 40 minutes or so with prepared questions, and then we'll be taking questions from the chat with the remainder of the session. So if you want to turn on your mic and ask your question, please submit your chat via the public chat, and we'll go ahead and call on you during that time. And if you'd like us to read the question out for you, please send that chat directly to Khadijah in a private chat. And without further ado, let's get started with these introductions, starting with Kelly.
Thanks, Erica, and thanks everyone for joining. So Kelly Choi, I was part of the honors program in medical education, graduated from College of Arts and Sciences with a degree in English in '94. It sounds like eons ago, right? Graduated from medical school in 1998, Northwestern internal medicine residency in 2002, and then completed my clinical cardiology fellowship at Duke in 2002. And really at that point, I decided to leave clinical medicine and spent a few years at McKinsey and Company in management consulting, and then to pharmaceuticals at Novartis. Excuse me. And since then, for the past 11 or so years, I've been in the healthcare technology startup space. Most of that time has been spent in oncology, precision medicine. And recently I made a shift to move into the wellness space, focusing on the role of multiomics and multiomic platforms to advance both the creation and advancement of wellness solutions, products, as well as partnering with partners in pharmaceuticals and biotech. And so really excited to be here.
Great, Mark, would love to hear about you now.
Great, hi, I'm Mark Stopsky. I graduated from WCAS in 1986. I was a sociology and organizational behavior major, and then stayed at Northwestern Medical School and finished in '91. And in the middle of medical school, after my second year, I took a year off to get my MBA from '88 to '89. At the University of Pittsburgh, and then I came back to finish medical school. It's kind of a planned excursion when it was a deal I made with Dean Snar, who was the dean of medical school at the time. And the goal at that time, I wanted to be a surgeon, and I became a surgeon. I trained in urology at the University Hospitals of Cleveland, Case Western Reserve program. But I also was extremely interested in biomedical innovation and the venture capital space surrounding that. And that was really my goal. And I kind of set out on this non-traditional career very early on. So I trained as a surgeon at Case Western Reserve, and then stayed on faculty there for a number of years. At the same time, built up a kind of dual career in biomedical venture capital, and consulting to big pharma, big biotech, and what have you. And then in 2012, I moved over to the Cleveland Clinic to wear two hats to kind of continue the progression. I stayed on as a urologist on staff at the Cleveland Clinic, but also served as senior director at Cleveland Clinic Ventures, which is our internal venture capital group, where we had a portfolio of about 80 companies. And we really functioned as a traditional early stage venture capital group. And during my time there, I started an investment fund in Israel for the Cleveland Clinic focused on digital health technologies. formed a company based on my own translational research called Cleveland Diagnostics, which develops novel tests for cancer and other medical problems based on a very proprietary technology. And we spun out of the Cleveland Clinic after 4 rounds of venture capital funding. And at that time, after about 25 years as a surgeon, I left the Cleveland Clinic, and now I'm the full-time chief medical officer of the company that I founded.
Kristen would love to hear about your background as well.
All right, happy to. So I don't think I was as dedicated maybe to a career path when I arrived at Northwestern. So I graduated in '89 from WCAS with a degree in biological sciences. I thought I wanted to go to medical school until about halfway through my first quarter. So it didn't take long for me to realize that I probably wasn't dedicated enough of a student to sort of take that career path, but I loved science and I stuck with it and stayed with a science degree throughout my time there. And I had no idea what I was going to do with that, though. I thought teaching was an option, and I really, truly did not know. So I ended up in bench science for 4 years, sort of exploring whether I wanted to get a master's or a PhD and continue down the teaching path, or whether I wanted to do something different. And again, pretty quickly realized that I wanted to do something different, but didn't know what that was, and got really, really lucky and discovered clinical research, which has been my career ever since then, since the early to mid 90s. And what I have spent my career doing is really helping companies get medicines approved by the FDA and bringing new treatments to patients. I started on the site side, so meaning I was working with physicians that were running the clinical trials. I got to see patients and work with patients in the same way I would have potentially if I had taken a different career path. And then I moved eventually over to the pharmaceutical side, and I'm currently at a clinical research organization, and we're sort of a middleman in between pharmaceutical clients and the sites that are actually doing that work, and just helping enable that process to move drugs to approval.
Great. And then one by one, can you each tell us a little bit more about what you do today in light of some of the impactful classes or experiences that you had while you were at Northwestern that led you to pursue the career that you did?
So Erica, I think I'm up, right? It's the order. Yeah, so I didn't mention, so despite my medical and science sort of background, I actually am totally on the commercial side. So I actually found out later in life that I really love business development and sales. So really, after my McKinsey days, when I went to Novartis, I was actually on the commercial side, marketing and sales. And then when I went into the healthcare startup space, what I quickly realized was that in order to be able to sell platforms, especially that are new and really cutting edge, you needed somebody that at least understood or had a framework for understanding the science or the medicine. And so I sort of fell into that niche. And so what I'm doing today is I work for a unit within Thorne Health Tech. Thorne Health Tech is a company, we actually recently IPO'd in September. We're in the wellness space, and I work for the side that really focuses on B2B sort of relationships. And again, I really do like bleeding edge. So our company is very much focused on things like microbiome, biodigital twins, and of course, the genomics and transcriptomics and things are all, sort of central to that. But sort of where I think many of you guys are science majors, so you see this, where things are going is really in that sort of multi-omic direction. And, I think just anchoring it back to my experience at Northwestern, I always had a sort of a curiosity in sort of the humanities. So I was an English major, took a lot of literature classes, philosophy, religion, history. And I think where that's helped me is in sort of rounding out my communication skills, giving me a different perspective in terms of how I approach problems. And so it's a really nice way to round out the science side, so that, because my job is really more about people and connecting with people, and understanding, sort of what their pain points are and then how our solutions might help them. So anyway, Eric, I don't know if that addressed your question.
No, I love that. And Mark, if you could talk a little bit about your experiences at Northwestern and how that kind of brought you to what you're doing now and throughout your career.
Sure. You know, I like Kristen, I came to Northwestern not really knowing what I wanted to do. I had an idea that I wanted to be a doctor. And when I say be a doctor, when I thought about being a doctor, I only thought about being a surgeon. I really had no interest in being any other doctor than that. But I really wasn't fully decided because I was very torn between that and a career in business. And somewhere near June, but I took all the pre-med sciences and I chose not to major in the science. And people always ask me why I did that. And really, it was really had a simple reason. I wanted to become well-read and I wanted to learn how to write cohesively. And I just didn't feel like I needed to major in the science to do what I wanted to do. So I gambled because at that time it was a gamble. Most people going to medical school majored in art science. I decided around junior year that I could do both, that I could have a career doing both. And that all of a sudden set me apart as this non-traditional person. When I went to medical school, I made a deal with the dean that he would let me take a year off to get he actually would let me take 6 years off to get a PhD, but he gave me 1 year to get as much done of my MBA as I could get done. So I found a program that I could complete the MBA in 1 year. I chose urology because at that time in surgery, all the really cool surgical technologies were being born out of urology. So lasers, laparoscopy, robotics, they're all being born out of urology. And at that time, the program at Northwestern was king of the hill. It was kind of as simple as that. And it just kind of set the stage for a career. I was really interested in biomedical innovation. And the funding of that, how things get from the bench to the bedside. I was really interested and focused in that. And I decided that I could build this dual career doing both. That's what set me on the road. Now I'm the chief medical officer of Cleveland Diagnostics, which is a company I founded. As I said, we've been through 4 rounds of venture capital funding. We are in the middle of FDA approval for one of our cancer tests. And I'm the chief medical officer, so I run all clinical trials. And these are always multi-center international clinical trials. I'm very involved in our regulatory approval process and the management of the company. And there's not a day that goes by that I don't use the writing skills that I learned as a sociology major at Northwestern, not a single day.
Kristen, do you have anything to add about your experience at Northwestern?
I think I do, and it's really interesting. So, you know, unlike both Kelly and Mark, I stayed with a science degree, right? And I really was passionate about science, but I'm also incredibly thankful in the same way for the well-rounded education that we get by, you know, all the classes we take, just like Mark and Kelly too. I'm assuming, you know, we write every day, just the social skills of being able to meet people and talk about any topic, right? I mean, I think that is a skill that cannot be underestimated. That everything is business, kind of no matter how you're doing it, whether you're in sales, whether you're, you know, or whether I'm talking to a physician, I'm going to a site and trying to convince them to do a trial or participate or, you know, be a partner of LabCorps. You know, those skills are all very important. Although I do have to say, I loved all my science classes except for physics. I'll take that one off of the love list and set it aside. But I did survive it. And I don't think I would have changed anything about that path. But again, that well-rounded education that you get in the College of Arts and Sciences is absolutely priceless.
What was one of your favorite jobs throughout your career that you're not currently doing anymore?
Yeah, so, you know, I really enjoyed my time at McKinsey in management consulting. You know, probably calling it a whirlwind is maybe the best way to put it. So in 3 years there, I mean, really, you know, Mark took the time to get an MBA, well, and I didn't. So that was kind of like, you know, sort of the equivalent of an MBA, but it was truly really an amazing experience. And just the breadth of things that I was exposed to within healthcare and sort of globally as well. I was one of the teams working on the healthcare reform that when Tony Blair was in office, in the UK. So it was a pretty cool experience. But, I think the lifestyle of a management consultant, you just have to be sort of one of those types that wants to do it as sort of a life career. And so, but I would say, yeah, that was one that but again, I think the problem solving, the writing, the critical thinking, and, I think that comes not just from the science side. There's certainly a lot of that, in mathematics and science, but there's another element that comes again, from the humanities as well. So I really think that the well-rounded education I got at Northwestern really helped me.
As I said, I was a practicing surgeon, academic surgeon for a long time while I was building this kind of side-by-side career. When I finished my residency and went into practice, I told my wife I was going to practice for 10 years max, and then I was going to make this transition, and I ended up practicing for over 25 years. And the reason is, I love being a surgeon. And also I was allowed, my partners, my other faculty members let me have these career outlets. So everything kept being fresh for me. But honestly, surgery teaches you a lot of things. Teaches you responsibility that rests on your shoulders like no other career can teach it. And teach you how to stay calm under pressure and handle a lot of things. And these are invaluable skills in business. There are also some things in business that as a surgeon, you need to forget how to do because business requires team building and a cohesiveness that is not always present in the operating room. So there's a give and take there. But after 25 years of being a surgeon, getting up in the middle of the night, I have a very understanding wife and kids, but it was time for me to make the transition that I've been planning for a long time. And that transition has been really seamless. So I enjoy being a surgeon and I really love what I'm doing now.
Great hearing about your transition from medicine to business. Kristen, do you have anything to share about a job you're no longer doing that was one of your favorites?
So I think for me, it gets, so I was about 20 years where I would consider myself in patient care, right? So actually working with trial participants. And I did that for, a long time, and transitioning away from that was very hard. And I missed that sort of daily interaction. I get benefits now because I work from home. So there's a lot of flexibility for family, for, quality of life, I would say, but I do miss those sort of interactions working with the patients who are really, volunteering for no true benefit, right? We can never promise that there's going to be a benefit in a clinical trial. There's usually a placebo involved. So, they're choosing to contribute to science and to the future healthcare. And so working with those folks who are so, altruistic in their care, I do miss that daily interaction with folks, but it was time as well for me to move on.
Right, great hearing about that kind of experience with clinical research. We're going to pivot a little bit. What advice do y'all have for networking within your various industries?
I'm actually a big believer in in-person events. I think it's really hard to replace human to human connections. And so I found that, participating in conferences, meeting, going up to sort of whether it's, if you're in the vendor area, there are companies that you're interested in speaking to, or scientists or clinical researchers. I've found that conferences are, I think, one of the best ways to do that. The other ways now, of course, I think if you want sort of more of a lighter touch, maybe faster type of way of connecting, I would certainly encourage people to utilize LinkedIn. So I think many of the alumni out there I'm sure, would be willing to have a conversation or give helpful advice. So If I were in sort of in college, that would be sort of an avenue I would utilize. But like I said, I think, and then affinity groups, if there are sort of activities you like to do, you never know who you meet, in these different affinity groups. So I guess that would be my advice.
Can definitely relate to the power of in-person, feeling a lot more in touch than virtual. Mark, do you have any advice?
No, I agree with all those things. I am also a firm believer in-person networking. And hopefully we're coming out of this COVID nightmare and everyone's getting vaccinated. In my field, medical conferences are going back to in-person now. And I think, in my world, in the biomedical innovation space, there are a couple kind of preeminent conferences, the JP Morgan Healthcare Conference that's in January every year. The Cleveland Clinic puts on an innovation symposium in October of every year. There are a couple things that are just very well known, and it's amazing. You think that the biggest players in the space, in the venture capital world, will be standoffish to you, but honestly, they're generally not. I've always, but I do agree that the in-person touch is just much better way to do it.
Great hearing that things are not quite as scary as they seem, and people are not as standoffish as the I guess stereotype might seem. Kristen, do you have any advice as far as networking?
I think it's really the same. It's really important. I mean, all of our industries, I think, are small, right? And even the three of us are in the related industries, even though we don't necessarily do the same thing. I mean, we certainly are in the same space, and it's a very small industry, I think, science-based careers ultimately. So staying connected, making sure you're nurturing those relationships over time, even if it's through LinkedIn. I think we're all really understanding the true value of in-person, since it was taken away from us for almost 2 years in all aspects of our lives. So I think I went to my first conference in 2 years just several weeks ago, and just seeing people again, and even masked. I mean, it didn't really matter. It was just that in-person was really, really powerful. So super thankful that we are hopefully over the hump with vaccines and able to move on with some sort of normalcy with life. But LinkedIn is I mean, we used it for the last 2 years, obviously when we couldn't have, so there's definitely good avenues. And I agree with Kelly that, most people are open, and don't be afraid, I think, to reach out to somebody who you have a shared interest with and start a conversation.
Very excited to be getting back to the in-person element, but also we'll be taking advantage of LinkedIn. Has anything surprised you about how what you learned at Northwestern or in the early days of your career has helped you in your work that you currently do?
Yeah, I mean, I think to Mark's earlier point, even though I did do the 7-year medical program, I mean, I was 17 when I made that decision. So, I think we all learn as we get older, right? You get a little smarter about yourself. But so, I would say that the biggest advice I would give is just keep learning and feed your curiosities, because oftentimes that's usually where you're going to find, in a way, the greatest strength of sort of the source of strength for yourself. And it's typically the areas that you're probably the best at, or you become best at it because you become an expert. And don't be afraid to explore areas or topics, even as a hobby, to learn new things. Because the thing is that I think, even though at the time it may seem unrelated, and for the neuroscientists on the line, I know we have several there, but I think what you're doing is you're sort of like training the brain to work in different ways. And as I said, I can't point to one specific class or a paper that I wrote, but what I can say is that having both the sciences and some of the humanities, I believe, has really helped me to be differentiated in how I approach problems or situations, how I communicate. So I like I said, I think it's really important to just make sure that you're doing the things that really inspire, I guess.
Yeah, I've similarly found, I mean, I'm very early in my career of kind of figuring out how those 9 science classes were also really important, and how it all kind of built together, even when it's not being applied to science. Mark, has anything surprised you?
You know, honestly, some of my favorite classes at Northwestern were things that really had no, recognizable link to what I'm doing right now. I remember I took a series of classes called the Western Musical Tradition, and the tests were the professor would give us a piece of sheet music, and we had to identify the composer using a number of parameters that we learned. That was actually a very nice exercise in logic that has probably transcended almost everything I do. I will tell you that it is, to me, not true that you can just kind of fall into a career. I mean, I think that happens very rarely. The best way for you to be successful is to be expert at what you do. Because expertise will always trump almost anything else that you can do. But it does benefit you to be proactive to the extent that you can be, So for me, being proactive was, listen, I knew I was going to need an MBA at some point, so I took an extra year and got it, and that saved me kind of a range of difficulties down the line, because it's pretty difficult to get the MBA when you're training to be a surgeon, and then life starts to hit you in the face and you have to bob and weave, so a little bit of proactive planning goes a long way, I think. And then the last thing is, and the one thing that I was really a stickler for, is I never gave up any time with my family throughout this entire thing. And I probably worked 80, 90 hours a week as a surgeon. All right. I coached every one of my kids' Little League teams. I never missed a band performance or a theater production, never ever. What I did was I just didn't sleep. I took care of my work, so my kids knew that I wasn't giving up them to do my career. I think that it's extremely important, because your career starts to take on a life of its own. And it's very easy to get lost in that. So I highly recommend that you have perspective as you pursue your careers.
Can unfortunately relate to that lack of sleep, but very much admire your ability to balance that proactivity and that drive with quality family time. Kristen, has anything surprised you?
Well, I think, I don't know about surprise, maybe being the right word. I'm thankful that I did find my career, because unlike Mark, I really truly wasn't directed. And I don't know that I would have believed myself during that time if I was directed in a lot of ways. And so I needed that time to really explore my interests. And I think while being proactive is really great, I also think the freedom to sort of giving yourself freedom to change course, to, if it ends up not being what you want to do, and pivoting. For me, I thought medical school my whole life until I, was like weeks into college. I was like, wait, I don't want to do this. And then I had to tell my parents, right, that I didn't want to be a doctor. And that conversation was hard, but they were super supportive. And then I truly didn't know what I was going to do. And I did fall into my career, and so incredibly thankful. And I'm hoping, by talking about it, that I'm saving others from having to fall into it. But in clinical research, I would probably say 50% of people fall into it. And we would love this industry to be much more proactive, because it is a fabulous industry. The work-life balance is totally your choice. You can work part-time, you can work full-time, you can work from home. You can travel, which is great if you're just out of college and you want to, be traveling either the US or even globally. I manage a global team right now with, folks all over the world, and I'm just super thankful that I found this career, and hope to inspire some other folks to, to choose it versus, have it sort of fall into your lap like I was lucky enough to do.
Can very much relate to the feeling of falling. It's my last quarter at Northwestern, and I went within the span of 3 months from pursuing a PhD in computational biology to being a quant within finance to now going into consulting. So I can feel that falling, and hope to get a little bit more proactive with time. But what do y'all wish you could tell yourself as, you know, a Northwestern undergrad, knowing what you know now, given that so many students on this call are in a similar position to where you possibly were?
I would say, you know, I'm probably somewhere in the middle between Mark and Kristen as far as falling in versus being proactive. I would probably give my younger self the advice of don't stress too much about making the absolute right choice. I'm sure all of you guys are perfectionists, like we all are, right? As alumni, or were, and maybe still are. And so you think that, you know, one decision could be the most cataclysmic decision, right? Whether it's picking a course or a major or that first job. And the reality is that life is a journey. And to what Kristen said, if I had predicted where I would be today, I would have never have predicted that. And so I think that if you're very clear about what you want to do, great. You know, use that to be proactive. But if you're not, it's okay. Because the world's a big place. There's a lot of opportunities, and you know, and Mark and Kristen probably can echo this, but I mean, we are really living in extraordinary times today with the amount of change that's happening and the innovation and the pace of change. There's just so much opportunity out there, especially for really talented, you know, well-educated people like you guys. So don't stress too much about trying to make the perfect decision, I guess, is what I would say.
Great advice. Mark, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And honestly, you know, I was super focused on being a surgeon. And honestly, if there's one change I would have made, it would have been really to broaden my horizons and look at other fields of medicine that might have got me where I am quicker, or that may have been just as interesting and enjoyable to being a surgeon. So I would have been my second go around. I would have been much more open to different career paths in medicine, but I totally agree. You can make a lot of mistakes and still do extremely well. And in fact, some of the mistakes that you make, you learn. You learn more from some of the mistakes you make along the way, and some of the wrong turns. And then you learn from your successes, and certainly been true in my career. You know, you hear time and again, you know, major people in industry got fired 2, 3, 4 times, only to end up at the top of their, you know, their organizations. And it's really true. You know, take risks. Don't be afraid to make mistakes because you think it's going to be a career-changing event. It never is.
Great. Glad to hear those mistakes are not truly mistakes in and of themselves. Kristen, do you have any advice? Sorry.
Yeah, mine is really pretty similar, I think, to really both Kelly and Mark, and it's really don't be scared to fail. You know, don't be scared to try something new, to pivot, you know, to make those life changes, because it really will be all right. I mean, there are so many different options for people that are driven. Keep working on that network, making sure that, you know, you keep broadening your horizons, and you can always make that career change and start something new and different. There really truly is no true failure, like Mark said. It's all really learning about yourself and where you want to be in life, and that changes over time. So it's okay, you know, that you don't end up where you started in a career.
And you're allowed to have more than one career in your life.
Yep.
You know, people think, oh, you know, I'm so focused on what I'm studying now. This is what I'm going to be done. I just decided, I'm 21 years old. I've decided what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. You are allowed to have more than one career in your life.
I mean, just to add to that, I would say, I mean, you guys are very lucky to be coming out, you know, around this time, because I think when Kristen and Mark and I were coming out of school, I mean, career paths were much more linear back then. So, for example, I think I'm still the only person in Duke Cardiology's history to have ever left medicine. So, you know, you're put on a track, but I think with the world where it is today and where it's going, it is very non-linear. So as both have said, just be open to possibilities, because sometimes when you're too focused on a narrow path, you miss out on even better opportunities because you're not even aware of them or letting yourself be aware of them. So I would say, I think you guys are coming out at a really exciting time, and there'll be more opportunities than you can do.
Can you any of y'all briefly talk about what has gotten you through those pivots, or, kind of what has led to you charting this, nonlinear path and what you were feeling in that moment, and advice you have for someone that might be in those similar shoes, 5-10 years down the line?
Sure. And I'll be quick since I just spoke again, but I think it's really simple, guys. We all have we all have our inner gut, right? And so in hindsight being 2020, I can tell you that I knew all along as I was going through the pre-med classes, medical school, residency. I mean, obviously it took me a long time to sort of take action, but I knew all along it wasn't the right fit for me. But I did it because of, all these external things that I kept thinking about. So I think in your gut. So if it's something you're passionate about, if it's something that just feels right, go with it. That would be my advice.
Great. Does anyone have anything to add?
I totally agree with that. I mean, people always say, "Oh, how could you walk away from being a surgeon?" Well, to me, I really didn't walk away. I think that if you, I still think of myself as that, even though I'm not in the operating day. And I think, what you really need to be doing, and honestly, I hate when people use the word passionate about things. I kind of hate that phrase, but the reality is that success comes from effort and enthusiasm. And if you are not enthusiastic about what you're doing, you will not be successful. So the minute you stop being enthusiastic and excited about what you're doing, that's the time where you need to transition to something that you are enthusiastic about. And so it's not so much about passion, like a deep, but it's just, listen, you have to get up every morning to do something. And it's a much easier life if you are excited about what that is that you're doing, that you're going into work to do. So for me, after 25 years of practicing medicine, it was satisfying, but it wasn't exciting anymore. Okay. And I was totally excited by the venture capital and biomedical world. And I still am. I get up every day. I can't wait to get to work. That's how you need to feel. And if you don't feel that way, you should find something that makes you feel that way.
Yeah, I agree with that completely. Every pivot that I made was based on, sort of that excitement, that desire to be learning, continually learning and doing something new, and just follow your heart in that. Life is too short to do something that you don't love, quite frankly.
Great. So as y'all can see, we are getting some questions in the chat. So I'm going to turn it over to Khadija with the rest of our conversation today.
So we have a lot of questions, and I have a question myself. It's about networking. I'm wondering whether networking is as important in the medical field.
I think it depends on, well, okay, short answer is yes. I think no matter what field you're in, you want to have a base of colleagues that you develop relationships with, because you can help them, they can help you, and you never know when that happens down the road. So I would say yes. But I think it's actually important, really, no matter what field you're in, to have a very strong network of colleagues.
Yeah, and it's also about developing a set of interpersonal skills that will serve you in different environments. And learning the networking process allows you to communicate with people in a way that is collegial. And I agree. You never know when the person you met a year ago at a conference is going to fit into what where an area where you need help today. And I can tell you it happens a lot more than it doesn't happen.
Thank you. So we have another question by Amy. Can you unmute yourself? Feel free to ask your question. Amy.
Sure. Hi, can everyone hear me okay?
Sure.
Amazing. So I was just really interested in what Mark said about passions being a misconception. And I have heard passion so many times as an undergrad. And I was wondering, I was really interested in hearing from Kelly and Kristen and maybe others about some advice, what is some advice that you heard when you were young that you think is totally wrong now?
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with Mark, and I think I erroneously might have used that word in an earlier answer, but yeah, I mean, I actually was never one of those people that knew, what my quote passion was. And the other thing I really dislike is calling. It's like you're supposed to wake up one day and then you're supposed to be doing X. And some people are very fortunate. I would say it's a minority of people who really feel this, attraction to a mission, and that's great. But I think for most of us, the way I sort of looked at it was the way Kristen looked at it is, am I, excited about, am I interested, right, in this next opportunity or in this specific area? Do I like the people? And to what Mark was saying earlier, I would say some of the big decisions I made were actually based on people. And I can tell you now that I would much prefer to work in an industry that maybe I wasn't that excited about, but working with phenomenal people that I've worked with in the past versus a super exciting company with people that are maybe not so great. And that choice would be, I would easily make in any situation. So what I would say is just, it's probably more figuring out where your curiosities lie, as I said before, and what are you genuinely interested in? You guys all know probably, where do you spend your free time, for example, right? If you're spending your free time reading extra stuff about computer science or computational biology, well, I think you probably have your answer, but maybe you've got other hobbies that are outside of your, and don't underplay the hobbies, because sometimes those end up turning into a second career. So I would say just follow your interest. I mean, interests are probably, maybe it's a better word. And to what Mark said, what gets you excited? That's probably a more pragmatic way to look at it.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that's going to change over time too. So be open to all of those changes and listen to, whether you call it passion or a calling, those things will evolve over time as you mature and different people come into your life and influence your life, whether it's, a marriage, children, other people you work with, to Kelly's point, that, will come in and influence you, and be open to those things, and make sure that you're excited every day about, not necessarily every day. I mean, we all have horrible days at work. That happens, and that's okay too. But, overall, that you sleep well at night, even if you're not sleeping much, that, you enjoy what you're doing. And, that would be my advice.
Yeah, I totally agree. And the last thing is that you need to, taking risk does not mean that you jump off a cliff every day. Like, you have to be able to take educated risks with your life and your career. I never took a risk, though, that would hurt my family, but on the other end, some people get so comfortable in what they're doing that they get stale, their career just gets stale, and that's really what you want to avoid. You want to find a kind of a middle ground between rolling the dice every day and getting so comfortable you're just kind of going through the motions every day. Because that, to me, is a waste of a Northwestern education.
And I think just to speak to what Mark just said, for those of you guys who took any economics courses, I think what most people don't realize is that when you don't take action and you keep things the same, you're actually making a decision.
Right.
So you don't think you are, but you are. And so there's an opportunity cost, right? So, I mean, you're basically choosing a different series of sort of sequelae. So just think about that. As Mark said, if you're staying in a job where maybe you get paid really well and things are great, but you're kind of bored, there's downsides to that may not be obvious to you in the short term.
Thank you all for this great advice. Now we have another question by Mary Armuska. Feel free to ask your question and unmute yourself.
Hi, so we talked a bit about sleep, and I was just wondering if there was a way to be successful in navigating career paths without sacrificing sleep.
Sure, I guess I'll go first. I mean, I do think that for specific careers, like being a surgeon, and when I was in cardiology, it's somewhat unavoidable. But you know, for sort of moving away from those specific professions, this is where I think, you know, it's using the 80-20 rule, I think is absolutely critical. So perfection is the enemy of the good. And so you may not apply that necessarily to, you know, studying for an exam or some of the things that you're doing in a lab, but I think prioritization is key. I think also leveraging and working well with your colleagues, because you can't do it all no matter what situation you're in. So being able to delegate, collaborate. So having good people skills, as Mark has mentioned many times, it enables you to get that leverage. And to Mark's point, nothing is more important than your health. So this is where rigorous prioritization comes at play. And you know, somebody like Mark and I, we've dealt in life and death, and I'll tell you, like 99% of the stuff you see in every day is not life or death. It can wait till tomorrow. So I think, you know, just having a big picture and making sure you take care of yourself, you spend time with your family and friends, things that really preserve sort of your own mental and physical health are critical.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I must admit, you know, my pager made me almost a Pavlovian dog. You know, that pager went off, my blood pressure skyrocketed, you know, so it's very nice to be able to go to sleep and knowing that pager's not going off anymore. But I will tell you though, you know, my examples about sleep are really examples of effort. Vince Lombardi said, you know, nobody ever fell to the top of a mountain. You know, it's really true. You know, I have 3 kids, 1 millennial and 2 Gen Zers. Okay. And, you know, and there is a different mindset today. There's just no doubt. But what's important that you know is that, you know, there's a certain amount of effort that is required to be successful. And you just can't get around it. You know, you have to be willing to put forth the required amount of effort, you know, to be successful. So in much of my job, as Kelly says, you know, things can go to the next day. They're not life-threatening things, you know, but, you know, when the FDA calls and says they're coming on Monday for an inspection of my lab, well, then that takes a different amount of focus. Then I go back into surgeon mode, you know? So you have to understand that when you go into the working world, there's going to be a certain expectation of effort to provide you with a level of success. And it's just something that you have to get used to.
Yeah, I agree with that. There are definitely times when you have to work hard and you lose sleep. I mean, all of us for sure have had that, whether it's that you're working late hours or you're just worrying, quite frankly, you know, about that sort of next day sleep loss. But it is also about balance, like Kelly said, and making sure that you're supported by both your, you know, whoever your manager is going to be and whoever your direct reports are going to be, you know, as you move through your career, and that you're making smart choices about the types of, you know, projects you take on and things like that. You know, in my line of work, I was just super lucky to be able to work from home while I was raising the kids. I also, like Mark, never had to miss you know, an event, and I didn't really have to lose sleep, luckily, in my career path to manage those things. I worked for a pediatrician for 7 years, and when I was pregnant, I, you know, went to work the next week after I had my baby and brought him with me, and, you know, did a meeting and then went home, you know, to take the rest of my maternity leave, because it was an important, you know, FDA meeting that you can't miss, right? So I think you can find that balance really probably in any career, but it's on you to balance yourself. Nobody else is going to balance you. If you're willing to work 22 hours a day, whoever you're working for will probably let you do that and take advantage of you in that way. So it's really up to you to make sure that you're balancing your own life and your priorities, you know, as you see fit for your own family and for yourself.
I mean, just one other thing I'd like to add to that is, we use the word success a lot, but as I said, I think that career paths are so nonlinear. I mean, look at how the gig economy is exploding, right? And you hear all the time about people who are bankers at Goldman Sachs who are now doing something, they're off on their own, doing their own business. So I think the success thing, I think you have to define for yourself what that is. It's not necessarily what your neighbors think or your parents think. So I think that's a really critical thing to try to anchor in on, what makes you happy and how do you define success, right?
Totally. This is very interesting and inspiring. We have another question from Nick asking if there were any moments where you felt really anxious or uncertain about what you would do for your career, and how did you deal with that?
So for me, it was when I made the decision to leave clinical medicine. And in fact, actually going back to a pager story that Mark made, I got paged, I think at like 2 a.m. because a patient's defibrillator was not working properly. And I kind of had my sort of, moment there. But it was a really, really tough decision. I mean, how do you go through residency, medical school, fellowship, and leave? So what I did at that time was and this is again, bringing back the network, I started talking to friends about sort of, the thoughts I had. They had friends of friends who had left medicine. So, I mean, I ended up talking to about a dozen people who I had never, spoken to before because my friends had friends of friends. And so I think really, talking to people who had similar experiences, seeking them out, networking, getting advice, people are really willing to help out there. They really are, as we've said before. Whether it's your peers, whether it's people who are, ahead of you in years, but there are a lot of people out there that are willing to help and can give you really good advice. So that would be my one of my strongest recommendations.
Yeah, I think there are many. I can point to 1,000 points in my career where I, questioned what I was doing and questioned if I was ever going to get where I wanted to go, where the kind of the vision I saw for my career. I have to admit, I think early in my career I responded much differently than later in my career to those kind of inflection points. Early in the career, I was kind of flying at the speed of fear. Like I wanted to do everything. I just wanted it all happen all at once. But I recognized that it was going to take some time, primarily because even though I had an MBA, I really had no expertise in business yet. I had to build that up in order for me to get where I wanted to go. So then I calmed down a bit. I think that the nice thing about that is I think I made a much more mature decision with my career than I would have early on, where I just wanted it to happen all at once. I think you need to just kind of let things unfold sometimes. It's not to say that you shouldn't, have direction, but sometimes you just can't plan everything. You have to just let things unfold. The minute I did that, things really calmed down for me, and I was able to kind of make much more rational decisions.
Yeah, I would agree. I think, a lot of times anxiety or worry or things like that are in some ways healthy, right? It means that you care about what you're doing. It means you care about your path. You care about the stakeholders that are around you in your daily life. So family, friends, colleagues, things like that. So I usually try and turn that type of energy from a negative to a positive and try and understand why I'm feeling that way. And that sort of helps take that next step, understanding and forming, what that next step is I'm going to take in my career ultimately.
I will say it's very, very important to have support around you that you can trust, that doesn't put any value judgments on what you're doing. And for me, it's I met my wife the second year of my residency. So she knew exactly what she was getting herself into. And she's always been that person that was kind of like the order in the middle of all the chaos, you know. And again, and my kids, I don't know, for whatever reason, they've always been very understanding of kind of my life and what's going on. But it's really important that you have somewhere to go, that when you go home at night, that you have a support system that you can trust and that doesn't put any value judgments on you, that would just listen to you and can be a good backstop and sounding board for you. You know what I mean? Because it can be very difficult during your day job to voice frustrations and concerns and things. Sometimes it's looked down upon. You really need to have kind of a sanctuary where you have people that you can trust that can be a backstop for you.
Thank you so much for your advice. It's really reassuring and I mean, like helpful for college students and for everyone in this panel. Thank you so much for logging on today, and please join me in thanking our alumni speakers for sharing such great insights with the group today. Keep an eye out for a follow-up email from Casey with the alumni information and an email from Grubhub with your $20 credit. The Waldron Connection program typically buys student lunch when they attend these alumni programs. So they're sending you $20 via Grubhub to buy yourself a meal. Thank you all again, and we hope you have a great rest of your day. Thank you, and go Cats.
Thank
Go
you.
Cats, thank you.